What questions have you got for me today?
Peter, you want to go first?
Oh boy. Okay, well, I've got one. Have you, Mike, had any of the manifestations of the like the gold dust or the manna or water to wine or the gemstones? And if so, how do you? Yeah, I mean, my biggest question, once you've answered that, is how do you know if they're legit and they aren't, you know, whatever?
Yeah. Okay. I've had a number of manifestations here at various times. We've had gold dust appearing on people's hands and faces, and I've had it on my own face and hands. I wouldn't say that we particularly focus and look for those sort of manifestations. When we were having our revival meetings, we had sort of 3 months worth of revival meetings every night. There were quite a lot more manifestations there because there was an open portal and God's glory was manifesting in certain ways. So personally, yeah, I've had experience of that. We've had gold dust sometimes. We have fragrances that appear in the room that most people can actually smell them, but although some people can and some people can't. So that's an indication that they're not just natural fragrances, but they are fragrances that people smell, but then obviously not actual fragrances. This is where some of these manifestations and how they work are quite interesting when you think about them. In terms of gemstones, that we've not really had any gemstones. We've had things like oil appear in people's hands. I've had sort of a sheen on my hands, which is very fragrant when you pray for people and as a manifestation. I've had a number of people had oil appearing in the palms of their hands. That type of thing. Although we don't go looking for it. If it happens, it happens. I think those things, from my understanding, happen more when there is an opening in heaven, which is pouring something down. We have a lot of angelic manifestations, so we have a lot of portals that open. We even captured some of them on pictures with these sort of globules, things that appeared in the room and things like that were caught on camera. Are they real? Well, the ones that I saw, I guess I think they're real. Anything can be faked, I guess, but I think they are genuine manifestations. I know Ian has had feathers, angel feathers, and I know quite a lot of places have angel feathers and that type of thing that appear. What are they for? Well. Signs and wonders, they sort of point to something being supernatural and outside of our normal understanding. But Tom, have you had any of those sort of things yourselves?
Well, yeah. Well, I've had the feathers show up a few times. I've had a little bit of a gold dusting. And then, of course, feeling things. I feel that, like the portal, like you're talking about. Getting those. Some people describe it as like an angel playing with you or touching you. Where you feel like you go, whoa, or something like that, and you get that electrical shock kind of thing. And I've been around when like the gold teeth have appeared, and there's no explanation for it, and it just shows up. But the one that I'm specifically referring to is the thing about the gems, because we have a brother in the area here who that's something that happens in all of his meetings, and it kind of unusual. He starts coughing, and it comes out of his mouth.
All right.
Yeah. And what's weird is that there have been times when people have said, I see a gemstone coming, and it's going to be purple, and sure enough, boom, out of his mouth comes a purple gemstone. So it's like, okay, did the guy fake it, or somehow sleight of hand, and he's able to? But I don't know, and I was just wondering because I know there was that whole thing up in Coeur d'Alene where a while ago where even Patricia King did an XP media video thing on it, talking about all these big gemstones, and then they ended up finding out that some of them were fake.
Right.
And I'm just wondering how do you discern something like that? How do you know? I mean, I know this brother's heart is for the Lord and he's wanting good stuff, but how do you know that things are,
I think you just have to engage your spirit and ask your spirit to give you verification of things. You have to have peace within yourself, and I would err on the side of not being skeptical or cynical about things, because God loves a childlike heart and a desire for things to be of Him. Not that I want to be gullible or naive, but you get it. I get a sense of in my spirit when things aren't right. It's almost like you just feel that check in your spirit to, be careful. But on the flip side of that, when something happens that you've never seen before, or there's an experience or a manifestation which is quite weird, you've got to be careful not to judge it immediately as, oh, God couldn't do that, because God is removing all the barriers and the boxes, and He can do an awful lot more than initially we were experiencing a number of years ago. I know with the things with gold teeth. I mean, I spent some time in Brazil, and I saw the gold teeth thing very, very clearly manifest. And people I know who had gold teeth in their mouths, they couldn't fake it. It was just it was there, and then it wasn't there. It wasn't there, and it was there, and it was just like, well, that's why did God do it? I don't know. Sometimes I think God just does things to shake things up, to have fun, and to get us to say, wow, what's that? And sometimes I think there are symbolic things in what He does, and sometimes I think we can try and read something into it, and it's just, hey, God manifested Himself in that way. So long as we are open and able to receive what God does when He does it, I think it's okay. And I'm not sort of sure myself in a lot of these things. Some of the things that happened to me were quite out of character, in the sense, I'm not into perfume or smelly stuff at all, and yet God chose a number of times to allow these sort of perfume, sheen and oil stuff to be on my hands, and I think He was having fun, really. It was almost like, oh, you don't really like this stuff, but I'm going to show you that I'm bigger than that. And in the end, I had to sort of, sometimes repent of my sort of attitude, and it was like, oh, God's God, and I need to let Him be God, and that means that I need an open heart, but a discerning heart as well. And I think trying to keep a balance in those things. Maybe not easy, but I think it's key when it comes to engaging heaven and engaging the things of heaven. There are new experiences all the time that if we're not willing to pursue, we can miss out. If our minds get in the way, and we try and analyze things too much, we can miss out. And I've gone from being very left-brained and analytical into training myself to be more right-brained and flowing in creativity. So, there are new experiences, and I had a powerful new experience last week where I was pursuing wisdom, and I've been pursuing wisdom, in Proverbs 8, and the whole thing of wisdom, being in the high place and where the paths meet, and this sort of scripture, and I've been pursuing engagement with wisdom, and I've had a number of engagements, and I was with wisdom, and wisdom, she asked me to look into her eyes, and when I looked into her eyes, I was sort of taken into a different place than I've been before, and I find myself in a courtroom, in a sort of a sort of judicial place, really. And normally when I go into those places, I stand before a bench and I present something, or something gets presented to me. But I was sat at a bench, and in front of me was a scroll, and my mind was thinking, well, what do I do? And then my spirit just started to speak. Now, I didn't speak in words, but the thoughts of my spirit came out and actually got transcribed onto this scroll in front of me, which was like, ooh, this is really cool, but what is this? And I found myself, it was in the Court of Kings, and the Court of Kings is three courts that are in the realms of heaven: the Court of Kings, and the Court of Councils, and the Court of the Upright. And I've never been there before, but I was there, and I decreed this law on this scroll, and so I looked at it and rolled it up and took it out, and then wisdom met me and took me to another place where I had to present that scroll, and she described it to me as, this is the court of wisdom, and now that needs to be authorized. So I was like, oh, okay. This was not something I wasn't in charge of the experiences. I was just going with it. And so the scroll got unveiled, and it was presented before this bench, and this bench authorized it, and they stamped it, and then gave it me back. And then I went to another court, which was the Court of Scribes, where I have been before, and they took the scroll and then they wrote it out, and this, like, the scroll was like held up in thin air, in the air, and then it was added to the records, and that's what they said. Now this is added to the records. So I found this really quite interesting, and some of it was like I was decreeing a new law for something that God wanted to do and establish here over some things. And so I came out of the encounter. I wrote out what I said and saw, and I took it to our bench of three, and we looked at it and felt our spirits stir. So we went into the heavens together, and we went to a court, and we sealed it with the lion and the ox and the eagle seal. And then we were all instructed that we needed to then have the fourth face of God, the man, accept this as law and authorize it to be opened over us as a church. So we took it to then to our wider leadership team. We got a leadership team of 12 and a wider team, and presented it to them to sign, because each of us saw it being signed in the heavens. And we did that last Tuesday, and I wasn't around this Sunday. And the Holy Spirit just fell and brought the first of the decree into manifestation when he started turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers. And there was just manifestation of the father heart of God and sonship, and people were crying, and a lot of ministry was going on as a result of what we did. So it was sort of quite an interesting experience. But I'd never had that experience before. But I've learned not to try and analyze the experience, but to wait until the experience sort of unfolds, and then when I then write it out, then I bring it and we weigh it together, and we actually then say, okay, and we go to the heavens and work it out there, what we're supposed to do with it. So I'm not sure. So we've just got to be open, I think, and
wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah.
That is cool. That is cool.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
in a situation kind of like what I was just describing,
Yeah.
if you do feel like there might be something off, and now in this case, I'm just going, I've just been to a meeting and stuff like that, but like if I'm the one in charge, if it's our meeting or something like that, and something like that happened, and it's within our sphere of government, what would be the appropriate steps to take to,
Right. Okay.
I mean, getting it, because, all of this is about us learning how to judge and take authority in our spheres of influence and our mountains. What would be the proper protocol? I mean, I know there's Matthew 18 and all of that stuff, but with the things we're learning, how would you?
I think you have to weigh. I mean, if you're there on your own and you're the only one making the decision, then I would be looking to step into the ark and the presence of God and really get some direct insight into what to do, because there's ways of handling that which can mean everything can go really, really bad, or there are ways of handling it which you can use to actually learn and to use stepping stones. So if I felt that there was something that, this was heresy or something so bad that people needed to be warned and we need to make a position really clear, then I would gently try and actually explain to people, look, as a leadership, or I'm concerned here that this isn't actually what we hold to as a church, or what our understanding is, and we want you to put this on hold until we have prayed this through, or considered this, weighed this, got revelation, and we'll come back to you. So you can come out and say, right, this is wrong, hang the person, sort of thing, and it can create thing. But it's almost like I would talk to the person first and say, look, I'm concerned, but I want to have further dialogue with you when this meeting is finished. But right now, I'm just going to present this to put this on hold until we can resolve my concerns, and try and do it in a relational, non-condemnatory way. If the person's attitude to that is very confrontational and aggressive or really defensive, then that's an indication that what you are feeling is probably correct. If they take that as, that's okay, no problem, yeah, let's dialogue afterwards, we can share what was going, whatever, then I think that would show a good heart, and then you can work through what the issues might be. There may be things that are done and said which aren't so severe, and you can let them pass publicly, but you then need to then go to the person afterwards and sort of say, okay, I felt in my spirit that was great, and then it went into this which I felt seemed to be coming from the soul, or whatever you're feeling, and just again look to find a reconciliation to resolve the issue and to sort of explain it or move forward to it. But it really depends on the level of concern you've got, and and if you feel someone is really trying to be deceptive or really trying to affect people in a negative way, then your responsibility, if you're leading the meeting, obviously is to protect those people. But on the other side, you don't want to crush somebody, or so it's a delicate balance, And if there are things that, if we're very open to people in receiving people to bring things, but if I know that those people have a view of Scripture or a view of things which we don't necessarily hold to, I would probably talk to those people beforehand and say, look, we're really open to hear what you bring and receive what you bring, but we know that we don't agree in this area. Can you stay away from that area? And that might be, to do with eschatology, or it could be do a particular thing, or Israel, or different things that people have, quite strong viewpoints over. We would just sort of say, look, can you stay away from those areas, because, there may be issues around that we need to resolve. and be open, really, be open and honest. But yeah, it's those things are never easy.
Yeah.
You know, I always tend to err on the side of grace and look to try and resolve things later. You know, and then, you know, if it's something that, okay, you know, next week I can come back to the folks and sort of say, okay, look, last week this went on, we weighed it during the week, we just don't feel that this part of that was what we believe was right. There's nothing against the person who brought it, but actually sometimes we bring mixture, and, you know, Paul said we prophesy in part, so not everything is always 100% pure, but just really be open in explaining. It's like, yeah, we really felt that this was the heart of God, but that bit we weren't too sure about, so we just want you to just be careful. I think if you're open and honest and real about it, then I think people respond in that sort of way. If it's very much in coming in a judgmental attitude and a harshness rather than a gentleness of spirit, then I think that can cause more problems than the original situation if we handle it wrongly. So there's a wisdom that needs to take place. You know, if I'm not involved in leading the meeting and I go to a meeting and if I'm in relationship with the people, I might feel if God wanted me to go and speak to them, and I have. You know, occasionally we've had visiting speakers and they brought something which didn't really line up with what God was doing locally. I've gone, you know, but then I've got responsibility in that area as chairman of the local churches together group, so I have an authority to be able to go and say,
Right. Yeah.
Look, I'm concerned, I really don't think that's in line with what God's saying to us in the local area, you know, and approach it. And I've had to do that a few times. It's never easy. But if you go with the right attitude and you're looking for resolution rather than conflict, then it's easier to find resolution. If we look for conflict, then it's easy to find it. And I think people generally respond when we come with the right heart. And if they don't, then I think that would be a strong indicator that there was a major issue, which you then have to look at. And at the end of the day, you know, we wouldn't invite certain people back if they had that sort of attitude and weren't open for sharing and talking and, you know, and being challenged, because we all have to be willing to be challenged by each other, and confronted in love and to learn and to grow and to develop. And we don't see everything, and other people help us to see things at times. But I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't want to take all the time. Andra, do you have something?
Well, just I had some other things, but now that you kind of brought up the spirit of wisdom, that kind of just triggered something like that I've been wondering about. The 7 spirits of God and the menorah.
Yeah.
And how that's, I'm just interested to kind of find out more about the menorah and how that, I heard Ian say at one point that was, I think, a gateway, or that was, everything started with that kind of thing. I can't remember the whole context of it, but something around that. And I was having a conversation with someone about the 7 spirits and the fact that they weren't the Holy Spirit. And so that's a big, huge topic, I know, but and kind of controversial. I just wanted to kind of see what your thoughts are on that whole idea.
When I had some initial encounters in places in heaven, I did engage all the 7 spirits of God in different ways, and had revelation that they all brought in different things to me. But I was just exploring. It's almost like God gave me a lot of forerunner experiences that almost sort of provoked my spirit to desire and hunger for more, but there was a whole load of them, and I've been working through those different things, and also I think there are dimensions that you have to be at, or levels of maturity that you need to be at to be able to engage with those 7 spirits and with wisdom, because they're there to tutor and to train us in lordship and kingship. So the menorah type picture, to be honest, it just to me is a sort of picture that represents the different realms of heaven and the different areas of engagement. So Ian draws it like the timeline through the middle of it, and I think it's trying to describe something in a flat 2-dimensional picture that is multi-dimensional and is very hard to envisage without actually experiencing it. So I experienced the 7 spirits of God mostly by the river of the living water and the river of God, and they were all sort of encounters that I wrote down and I've gone back to. Subsequently, to get in my mountain and my throne and that top level mountain and being established in lordship, then my engagement with the 7 spirits of God has been different, and it's been much more. My engagement mostly was with wisdom. Now, at this point in time, I'm just not sure that wisdom, as described in Proverbs 8, is one of the 7 spirits of God. I think there is a spirit of wisdom and the spirit of knowledge and understanding and counsel and might and spirit of the Lord and fear of the Lord. But my experience with wisdom is that she is wisdom. In Proverbs 8, it doesn't talk about the spirit of wisdom. It just talks about wisdom and pursuing me and coming to me, and wisdom is where the paths meet, and that's where I've engaged wisdom. I've engaged wisdom in that high. It just describes it as the heights. And I'm not totally sure where it is in relation to the other realms of the kingdom yet. I just know that I can go there, and there's this big pillar that is there, and it's like it's not solid, and I can. It's like, for me, it looks like blue light, and I know it's where the present meets the future and the past, and there's the ancient past that meet. There's various things that I'm only really just exploring and finding, that when I meet there, wisdom seems to reveal things to me of somewhere new or something new or a different dimension of something. And the 7 spirits of God, whether they're wisdom's handmaidens or I'm not really sure, because I'm sort of working it out, but I have a feeling in my own encounters that the spirit of wisdom is not what I've met as wisdom. That spirit was different, and the engagement I had was different, and it very much worked together with knowledge and with understanding, and it produced counsel, and there was an interaction that took place. Now, recently, having met wisdom, and I started to ask about the 7 spirits of God and where I was to engage with them, because I've been wanting to teach people who have got their mountains how to engage. And it was an interesting thing. I might have told you before, but my wife, who is engaging more and more in these things, had on her tablet a download of the 7 spirits of God, a diagram, a PDF file that explained the 7 spirits of God, the colors of the rainbow, and all that they did. And she didn't ask for the download. She never went to the website. It just appeared on her tablet. And so I took it, found out where it came from. It looked very similar to Ian's teachings of the Spirit positioning us for authority or mandating us for position and those type of things. Mm-hmm. And each of them had a specific thing. I mean, I can send you the diagram if you want. I can email it to you.
Oh yeah.
That'd be great.
But it was I felt it was really significant. So I sort of started to pursue this with wisdom. So okay, where do I get tutored? Where is this a place? Is this a realm? Is this just some encounter that happens in heaven? Or can I pursue specific tutoring in this area? You know, if I want to know my position and the authority of my position, can I go to the spirit of wisdom or the spirit of understanding and get it? I've got the. Have you got the diagram here somewhere? There we go. Okay. So, in this, it's like, you know, the Spirit of the Lord mandates us for position, teaches us about positional dominion. So this is all about ruling. So for me, my encounters with the river of life, the throne of God, the garden of God, were very much about relationship and about knowing God in intimacy, knowing who I am, and all those encounters in my own garden, in my own heart, those type of things were all a pathway of relationship, and they were great. But the pathway of rulership seems to be a lot more protocol driven, and you need to understand and have insight into how you operate in a court and what you do in this place and how you engage this angel or this dimension. And so it's been a little bit different, and you know, my engagement in presenting myself as a living sacrifice, seeing that as yielding to the different realms in heaven, so that the tabernacle is a real place in the realms of heaven, but it also represents how heaven is patterned: outer courts, inner courts, holy place, holy of holies, and where you can yield into a different level of authority, and you come into a different level. And so, you know, then I look to engage around the ark, and you know, recently I've been looking to engage with the four faces of God. And so there's a sound which is coming out of heaven right now, and it's a sound which it's like a drawing our spirit back to home, and to come in and come out with revelation and understanding, and we're resonating with the sound. And that sound, in a musical sense, it has four notes to it. In a sense, I feel it represents the four letters of God's name in the Hebrew: the Yod and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, and that represents the rhythm of breath. So when Adam was birthed, if you like, God had breathed into him the breath of life. So the first thing he did wasn't to take a breath, but was to breathe out what God had breathed in to him. So there was a sort of a yod, which was an outward breath, and then a hey, which is an inward breath, a vav, an outward breath, and a hey, an inward breath, which is this almost like what I see it as in a heavenly realm sense. This sound has a frequency and a vibration with it, and it has with it a symbol. And what I see it as is an infinity symbol, but three-dimensional. So it's a going in and a coming out and a going in, but eternally going on and on, which is sort of the whole thing that I'm experiencing, and we are experiencing a lot here in our worship times, where this sound is just drawing people. And I know a lot of people are writing songs with a sound that sort of goes to the whoa oh a, and it's sort of a whoa oh a, and it's sort of, people are writing it as just in songs, and I'm not sure they know what they're writing, but I know that when I start to pick up those notes that are coming out of heaven before I've ever heard the sounds, and I know there's a connection, and I believe it's something to do with God calling our spirits to engage with eternity, and then bring eternity into the now, and to go back into eternity, and to have this continual flow of life that comes out of heaven through our life out into the world, that we then bring it back into heaven and back out. And it links with the sound of creation groaning, calling for the sons of God to be manifested and revealed, to bring creation freedom from the bondage it's in. And I've heard that sound coming out of a black hole, and it's a B flat, 57 octaves lower than a keyboard B flat, and it's a deep groan that's released from the darkness of creation, waiting for suns to bring light. And there's something about the sound and the harmony of we're supposed to come into resonance with, which brings us into destiny. And I'm just sort of exploring this a lot, but I know there's something significant with it. And I know there's something that's tied in with the seven spirits of God, bringing us into a deeper revelation of who we are and what we're positioned to do, rather than what we're in relationship. We just are in that place of peace and rest and awesomeness with God. But here we have responsibility as children to bring creation back into order. So we needed to be connected to what was, so that we can bring that into what is, so that what will be will be.
Yeah. Right.
So the seven spirits of God, spirit of wisdom, equips us for position. So the spirit of wisdom is to equip us. Therefore, what does that mean? A lot of things around what that means, to teach us of the order of things, about justice and various things, that if we're going to rule, we're going to make sure we have to rule in righteousness, so that justice can be manifested in love, not in anger or in any other way. So there's a lot of equipping and teaching that the seven spirits of God need to do when we get to a level of maturity that we are administering our throne and our mountain. Then there are higher levels, like going into the court of kings and being able to decree laws. On our mountain we administer the laws as a lord, but when you operate in the level of kingship, you are able to decree and make laws that then can be administered by others who are in lordship, if you like. So there's a lot of interaction that's taking place right now with me. There's a place, almost like it's not a university, but it's like a place where you can go and you can engage with specifically for what you're looking for. So I look at this and look at these things, and it's like the spirit of understanding authorizes us for position. Okay, well, what is that about? Because I read that and I think, okay, I know what an authorization is. So I'm in a position of authority or rulership, so this is about authorizing me. So it's teaching us where to and how to access the realm of God. So there's some really key information about protocol and where we engage to do certain activities that I think we need to learn. And I think if we're proactive about it in seeking wisdom, wisdom will lead us to the seven spirits of God and where we can engage. And so I'm just sort of working thus through it in my own life at the minute, but I know there's something really significant in it.
Do you think that that's something that's there's not, like, I mean, I don't want to say steps, but protocol, like you would engage? It's kind of like steps to, you engage the spirit of wisdom. I mean, like, the authority is not going to come until you're ready. So would you be given, like, tutored by the spirit of wisdom or whatever would lead you to that place where you're ready for the authority? Or do you think it's something that kind of can integrate and be, you're kind of learning all of it at sort of the same time, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, if you are occupying that mountain and you are enthroned there, and you've been given the scepter and the crown and the mandate and the mantle, if you have all those things, then you are in a position to start ruling. Now, I had an encounter a couple of weeks ago where I've been taking people to discover these thrones recently a lot. So I have been doing exercises and helping people to engage, and I found it helpful for people to think about Satan, who took Jesus up to the highest point and then showed him all the kingdoms in a moment of time, and in that place they can see the mountains that are below. And so I've been leading people there so that Jesus would show them, some of their mountains. I was talking to a guy yesterday from Maryland who I speak to every week, and I was been encouraging him to do the same thing. And he went there, and he was shown 7 mountains, and he was shown the names of them, and he was taken into an encounter where he had to kill 4 giant dragons, and all sorts of interesting things came out, because the previous time he'd killed a dragon but didn't know about opening up its belly and getting the stuff out from it. So he saw the 7 mountains. He shared with me what they all were, and we dialogued in terms of what it meant and what the names were, and how the different functions may have be outworked in relation to what he saw in terms of scrolls and different things that came out of the dragon's bellies. So there's a lot of engagement that can take place around this, that we begin to exercise, the authority. We get invested with authority to take that place on that throne and to rule the other mountains that we have. So there is a protocol or an order, maybe. Some people seem to engage with those mountains and find out that there are certain things that they're called to, or certain spheres of influence they're certain to have. I mean, this guy had the 7 ones were spirit, body, soul, body, house, church, ministry, and region. And so those were the 7 names of the mountains. Of course, then he had to go and say, okay, what am I supposed to do on the mountain that's called spirit, on the mountain that's called soul, the mountain that's called body? What are they? What's the house? Is that the place I live? Is that a collective house? Because it wasn't the church, because he had another one that said church. So then ministry, what was the ministry? So once you start to get some interaction, then you go back and you meditate and you get greater revelation, which is where I think mentoring comes in, because I've been able to help him significantly, and then when we come back the next week, he's got more questions, and then we sort of dialogue, and I share some stuff with him, and we sort of work it out that sort of way. Because sometimes it's like, that's what forerunners do. They go somewhere and then help people get there and go beyond. So I think there is a process, but I don't want to define it so tightly that it's only one way. I think we have to discover it for ourselves. So I've never encountered 4 dragons in one battle. He did. So it was like, okay, that's interesting. But I taught him how to deal with the first dragon that he'd experienced the previous week, and then he engaged 4 more. And he knew what to do instinctively, and then he got the revelation and the different things that came out, which is part of learning. Now he's not sat on his top throne yet. He's just recognizing I've got all these thrones, and when I recognized I had all these thrones, and I engaged those personal thrones, and I engaged our 7 church thrones all in one go, as I learned all this stuff, and I got really, really stretched in trying to, what do I do on all these thrones? How do I administer this positional authority that I've been given effectively without actually taking up 10 hours a day trying to do it? Which is when I had the revelation of, you need to be on the one throne that enables you to administer the others. And so when my usual process is to go and engage with the Ark of God and to connect up with the 4 faces of God, to look in to one of the faces of God that is resonating with me, and then the desire is from being in God, I can speak out of the face of God. So I might be speaking out of the face of the eagle that represents apostolic ministry to me, or I might be speaking out of the face of the lion, which represents kingship, or out of the face of the ox, which represents the prophetic. And I get drawn to different faces depending on what God wants me to do in terms of positional authority. So I go there to seek to resonate with the will of God for my day, what he might want me to do. I then go with the sort of authority from there to my throne, and then what tends to happen, my spirit starts to engage with one of the other thrones. You know, it might be, you know, that I just feel I'm drawn to start declaring things. You know, I'm making much more declarations, and I'm calling forth. God gave me a silver trumpet, and I know I need to declare things, and I need to call things forth. I'm doing much more of that because I now know some of the protocol of what I do on those mountains. And I'm learning as I go, but I'm teaching people as I go, and people are starting to get hold of it as well. But my engaged help here is to get as many people onto those mountains, and then we can start pursuing the seven spirits of God together, and I can lead them into some of the places where the seven spirits of God are, and then they can have their own encounters and how it works for them and the different ways it works. But yeah.
Well, I think that's probably where, like, I don't know about you, Peter, but I would need to start, because I have not engaged that at all. So that's one area that I would like to. I've just kind of put it, I know about it, but I've never really experienced it. I really haven't, I haven't gone there, because it's almost like I'm still trying to get the gateways open and get, the basic, I'm like, so the whole mountain thing, it's like, yeah, that's exciting and great, but I'm like, when do I start that process, or, when am I ready for that? Because, it feels like I'm trying to get all these other things,
And this is, I mean, the relational side of it is key, because you can't rule, you can't be a king until you're first a priest. And the priesthood side of it, which is the intimacy and entering into the intimate places with God, are the key to get the heart of God and to be able to resonate with God, so that what we do in the other side of it, on the ruling side of it, always comes out of love and always comes out of the heart of God. Right. And so there's nothing wrong in pursuing that, to making sure that you are able to engage God in the garden of your own heart, that you are able to get into the river of life, that you can get to the river of life and the tree of life and the garden of God, and those places which are going to bring you revelation of your identity and your calling and the things that God has designed for you. Those big things are the things that start to form in your heart as deeper desires. And when those desires get to the point where friendship with God and intimacy with God is your almost the deepest desire, then he starts to birth the other desires, which will be to bring rulership, because what comes with a revelation of sonship is responsibility to rule. And it's when the desire starts to form in your heart. It's this process of being stewards, and then friends, and then lords. And it's the point where lordship comes into it, where you then have to start saying, I need to start operating in the tabernacle spheres. I need to start engaging in the different spheres of heaven, because obviously you've got to outwork it at some stage. Now, I would encourage you to think, okay, what are the spheres of influence that I know God has given me? And one might be family, two might be work, three might be church. It could be spirit, soul, and body. I don't know. It'll be depending on what you get. But once you get hold of those things that you already know that you are called to operate in, then you need to then start to think, okay, how can I operate in those in heaven so that I can manifest those things on earth more effectively, more powerfully, you know, and bring heaven to earth through my life. Because opening up the gateways is opening up so that there will be a flow of heaven through you as the garden of God, out through you as rivers to manifest around you, to produce these spiritual atmospheres around you, to be able to engage with the spiritual realms that are around you, to be able to minister out of that, to get discernment out of that. Those things really all take place as a consequence of our relationship with God and a flow of being joined and yoked to Jesus so that we work together. And those are great, and those are, you know, praying for the sick and all those things, and words of knowledge and seeing the angelic realm and interacting. They're all great, but that isn't rulership. You know, that isn't. Those are just consequences of what we're all called to do as disciples, really. And it's great, and I wouldn't knock any of it. I think it's great. I do that. I minister to people on different levels and different things. But actually, I know that I'm called to do something different in the heavens, and I know that I'm called to have a sphere of influence which is local and regional, and therefore the things I do may be related to just what I'm called to do, and you'll be different, and you'll have different things that you know are spheres that God has given you influence over, which can get bigger and wider as you mature in it. But yeah, don't hold off long, because you know, if you're encountering God in intimacy, that gives you the legitimacy to start bringing God's rule. And to me, it's just another pathway. You know, I can follow the river of life pathway, or I can come up into the open door, which is open, like over Jacob, over Jesus, you know, over John. Come up here, and I'm going to show you some things. And it's always open. You know, you have the Old Testament, you have Jesus, and you have the New Testament, which gives you the testimony, which can anchor those experiences, so that it's like, I know those are open. It's the desire of my heart to bring godly rule and to bring the kingdom. Therefore, I'm going to go into the realm of heaven, and I'm going to ask God to show me. You know, and you know, if you've got engagement with your angels, ask your angels to help. They're there as ministering spirits for you as an heir of salvation, so ask them. You know, when I had this encounter where I was teaching people to come into these thrones, I was there and I was looking and I was seeing some of the thrones below, and I was looking below, and I felt I need to start looking around and looking up. And I've been drawn a lot recently to looking up, because I never look up into the realm. I'm always looking around. What's going on? Where's this? But I've been inspired to look up, and I've seen things in looking up which are completely different. And so I began to look around my throne, and there was my angel. And the angel that was the caretaker, who was looking after that throne for me until I come to the place where I could occupy it. I had never really thought about that sort of engagement, but then I looked and saw him, and I started talking to him, found out his name, and asked, what are you here to do? And he said, I am here to advise you on the protocol of the kingdom. So I've got someone I can go to also to say, well, how do I rule? How do I administer this? Do I need to make a declaration? Do I need to bind something to the truth? Do I need to loose something from the control of the enemy? Do I need to call things that be not as if they were? Do I need to release forgiveness? There are different keys that we have to the kingdom that we need to learn how to use, and I wish I'd asked him earlier, because it would have been easier. I've just sort of found out some of it myself by trial and error, but it would have probably been easier. But now, actually, I know I've found out some of those things, so I know that they're things which are real, so now I can encourage people to go to their angel, and maybe easier for them when I sort of get people operating more and more on those thrones. But you know, it's a journey, and it's a quest, if you like, that we engage with and we journey on. And there's not really a right and wrong way. You've got to go with the longings of your heart and the desires of your heart and the drawing. But you know, you have access to go. And it's just say, okay, you know, and you may, you know, if you've never encountered a dragon or a giant, you may encounter them when you start to push in onto the territory where they're operating and stopping, blocking and stopping you administering. Because if you've not been there, they will be there. And their whole role is to hinder you and to block the flow of resource and revelation and power and insight and wisdom for you to administer and see change on earth as it is in heaven. And
so we're trying to, sorry, I'm sorry, I wanted to just make sure I had that. So what you're trying to, you're encountering or engaging the territory God's given you in the realm of heaven.
That's in the kingdom of God realm, because that's the kingdom that's still light and dark, and we have to bring light to those areas, because once you start to administer the thrones and you start to get understand your position and understand the mandate and the authorization and all the things that the seven spirits start to do, then you can then start to see everlasting doors open. And that's when you really start to see the atmosphere of the earth change, when you start to bring down through those everlasting doors the glory of God and a manifestation of the rule of God, to really start to see things change. And that starts to clear the atmosphere so that there's an open heaven over your life and over different aspects of the areas of authority that you've got. You know, so the Psalm 24, you know, be lifted up, O ye heads. So, you know, the everlasting door. So effectively, you know, you are a head and you are a gate, but the everlasting doors are where the fullness of that manifestation of rule comes. There's a dimension that can come through our lives and manifest around us, which brings a authority around our lives, which is different from the authority that comes once the airways are cleared and the atmosphere of the earth is cleared from the principalities and powers and the rulers and those things, because we have opened the everlasting door and we have let the angels come into that, and we've assigned angels, because there's a lot of assigning of angels that takes place on those thrones, because we're not supposed to do the battling with those in the atmosphere of the earth. We assign the angels to do that for us, and then when they clear, we can then bring down through those things, you know. But that's all the stuff that I think we're going to be taught to do more and more as we learn to engage. But it's, you know, it's quite exciting stuff, really. But
wow.
So really, you would say to start just engaging God and asking Him to show me the areas, show me the names of my mountains, maybe just show me the spheres of influence. That's where I would start. Okay.
And you can use sort of the picture of Jesus standing, you know, in the doorway, waiting for you to come, and then taking you to the heights, and like Satan did to him. There's a testimony. Then I mean, I led a group last week, and one of the guys went there and he saw it as spheres. It was like almost the planets revolving around, and there were spheres that weren't static. They were interacting together, and it was like, oh, that's really interesting, because, you know, the realms of the kingdom aren't static. You know, they're interactive, and they overlap, and they work together, and several thrones may work together in cooperation. And, you know, so I thought, well, that's a really interesting way that he's engaged with it, and what he's seen is something much more dynamic of how it works. But that is what the symbolism was for him that he engaged with, and it helped him to see and experience it. You know, you'll see it and experience it in the way which relates to you.
Yeah. Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
You,
And that's
Mike,
something
oh,
I'd be open to doing
Yeah.
together too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Mike,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Mike, do you have like a protocol or like you know, like a basic way that you start taking people into that? Something written out or diagrams or you know, like a cheat
Yeah.
sheet, you know, like
Um,
like
yeah. I mean, what I've done is I've taken two groups, um, who- and started off with the basics of opening your imagination, opening the first love gate, that sort of basics. And it took me, I started them in April, and it's really taken me until I would say August to get them to a place where they are all really encountering, seeing, experiencing, feeling, engaging in different ways. Um, and I used various exercises along the way just to open them up. And the more they practice themselves, the quicker they get it. But it did help. And now, I'm now to get to the point where we've done all the River of God and the Garden of God and the waterfalls and the Throne of Grace and Tree of Life, and we've been there and we've eaten fruit and we've done a lot of those things, which are all cool things and they're all great experiences and all part of being able to draw from the life of God and see that manifest in our lives. But now we're to the point where I'm now leading them to those mountains, and then the next place is we're going to start going to some of the courts, and we will then I'll take them to maybe to, if they're brave enough, to the judgment seat and to deal with some other things. But it's a journey really that
do
you
you have
take.
any do you have any of those sessions like recorded where you've done that with people like Ian has, you know, on Eden and meeting God and
No, not really.
okay.
I think, yeah, it can be helpful to just hear things, but I think the experiences are so personal
Mm-hmm.
that the way in which you describe them has to just lead people to a point where then they can go on and engage the experience themselves. So, I start off with the River of Life. I think the River of Life is a key. It is flowing in us. When we open the first love gate, there is a flow of it that then we can follow two ways. We can go into our garden with it, and we can get in it in our spirit, and we can enjoy it and all the things that might be flowing there. Or you can follow it back and you can engage with it in heaven, and then look to where does it take me into heaven. And some of it I usually just take people, and it's like I will just pray, and it's just like, Father, take us by the hand now and take us to the banks of the river that's in the realm of the kingdom of heaven, and we're going to come there. And then, to start with, I then said, okay, from there, I want you to look to your left and see the river flowing down. I want you to look to the right. I want you to see a waterfall in the distance. Now I want you to walk on the pathway beside the river, and we're going to walk to the Garden of God, and we're going to come to the bridge. And so I've sort of initially it was a little bit more guided.
Yeah.
But then when they got hold of it, we would just go there, and I would just sort of say, right, okay, let's go to the Tree of Life, and then they would find their own way there, really. Having, the initial sort of way into it, I was a little bit more guiding, and then it became much more, okay, we're all going to go and let's have some fun and let's see what God says. And then we would feed back, and then we would some people I would help to see what they saw. Some of that led on to some really intimate ministry with people, because it opened up things because they couldn't get into the river, and it was like there was things that were obviously symbolic of blockages that then we ministered into. Some people then, had experiences of different color fruit and different things, and it's like remember, it's a multiverse, so you can all be at the throne of grace, you can all be at the tree of life, not necessarily seeing each other, because these were very much about personal encounters to try and enable people to be able to get to the tree of life and to eat the fruit when they needed it, to get to the go beyond the tree of life to the throne of grace, and to be able to get to the throne of grace when they needed it, which is all to do with our personal daily walk with God and having a flow of that life coming out of heaven. So, you know, because I've done it a lot, I really only use a couple of scriptures. You know, I sort of use Revelation 20. Okay, here's the river flowing and crystal clear, and you know, I just read that, and it's okay. This is sort of the tree of life's here, and that type of thing. You know, when I look to engage people in the thrones, I use the scriptures where Jesus was taken by Satan. There's two main scriptures in Matthew and in Luke, and you know, one just says he was taken up to the mountain, and the other one says he was taken up, and then it said shown the dominions and in a moment of time, and it expands on the understanding of it. So I still use scripture as a starting point for people just to engage with them, but it's been a fairly long process, and I wouldn't do that again because I would want to start from, hey, people are already able to engage, now we're going to get to the fun stuff. So I'm planning for some other people to do the preliminary stuff with opening people, the eyes of their heart, their imagination, being able to see and hear and feel as a separate course, which we'll probably take people through for a month, and then hopefully those that have practiced and are engaging can come into a sort of a more advanced stage so we can get things quicker. But this was just, you know, this is just where I started learning how to do it and how to take people. You know, I've done the supernatural workshops, which have a lot of exercises around the earlier stuff. You know, I think the supernatural workshops I did last year were a little bit more engaging, but they sort of were, you know, I used music in them. I'm not using music in any of these things because we've gone beyond that into, hey, we can just step in. Whereas I used music in those a lot to activate the imagination and to get the spirit activated, just so that people could start to engage more. So that, you know, those ones, obviously that one's available online anyway, so you've probably got that one, or I can give you access to it. But this is, you know, that was done with a group of say 30 people, whereas this is done with a group of say 10 to 12 people, two groups of 10 to 12 people. So it's a different dynamic when you've got a smaller group, because you can get more personal feedback and you can then share with people and give more insight into what they've seen, or just look to interpret some things. You know, but it's good. You know, it's a mentoring thing which I think God is using, and hopefully I can do that with more people as I get the opportunity. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I like Andra. I'd love to start a process like that with you and start doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
How do we do it?
Yeah.
How do we do it? Well, okay. Well, the next time we go, we'll just do it.
Okay.
You know, there's no barriers. You know, it's like, you know, we're connected through the realm of the spirit. Therefore, you know, we can go there and we can do some stuff, and we'll see what happens. I think that would be good, something to do next time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah.
I have one more question for you, Mike.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few. It's funny because a lot of the things I had written down we've kind of touched on. You've kind of touched on.
Yeah.
One was binding and loosing, and I was listening to your Kingdom Prayer message last night, and you mentioned a lady that has some good material on that, but I couldn't get her last name.
Liberty Savard.
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
Savard, and just liberty as in liberty. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's got 3 books, which and she's got an online e-book about the prayers that you can pray to bind and loose and things. I struggled for a long time with the concept of binding and loosing because
I do too. Yeah.
I just couldn't. It didn't feel right the way in which it was being expressed, and it just didn't sit right with me. So I had an engagement with heaven where Jesus talked to me about it and directed me in a particular direction. And then when I sort of followed that direction, I really found that it worked when I saw that it wasn't the way I was taught, or because I've always felt it's like, well, you can try and bind principalities and powers from here and all that stuff. Well, how long are they going to be bound, and when do they get unbound? And it's like, it just didn't make sense. And I think it may have been something that people did that was effective for a particular thing, but they made a theology out of it.
Yeah.
And then people tried to do the same things with less and less effect, because we're not supposed to do things from here to that realm. We're supposed to go above that realm and administer the kingdom down to clear that. So yeah, binding to me is you bind things to God's will, to God's destiny, God's purposes for people's lives, and you loose people from the things that are holding them back from those purposes. That's how I would see it now, and those are things we can do. Yeah.
Is there a Hebrew? Have you found some, like, how the Hebraic meaning of those words actually mean?
Yeah,
that
it did. I think I go into it a little bit in the teaching, but yeah, the meanings of them are very much to loose, is to destroy, is to smash strongholds, it's to completely loose something. It's not the other way around, and so the binding is what you do. You bind two things together. Well, I want to be bound to Jesus. I want to be joined to him. I want to be connected to my scroll. I want, and in the Old Testament, that's what they did. They bound the Word of God to their wrists and to their foreheads as phylacteries, and so that was the sense that came out of, when I look back into the thing of what they did with binding and the Word and stuff. They were looking to bind themselves to God and to his purposes, not to bind the enemy. Okay, you can, in this context of deliverance ministry, you can bind the enemy because you have authority over him. But
right.
that wasn't the context of the keys of the kingdom that Jesus talked about. The keys of the kingdom is what is already bound in heaven can be bound here on earth. What is already loosed in heaven will be loosed on earth. Now, I would originally have seen that as, okay, in heaven, we're all joined to Christ and all in Christ, and we're in God in Christ, therefore we can experience that here on earth. Great. Or actually, there's no sickness in heaven, so there's no bondage in heaven, so what is already loosed in heaven will be loosed here. Which is a stepping stone to me to realizing that I'm supposed to go there and do it. I'm supposed to come into agreement and make the agreements in heaven that they are outworked through my life on earth. So, I go and I bind there so that it will be bound here. So I first do it there, rather than it's already done there by someone else. No, I go and I bind there, then I can administrate that here in this realm from there. And so I've sort of grown in my understanding of what it does through some stepping stones, really. But I did find the Liberty Savard books quite good. They sort of go into it, and they go into the Greek and the Hebrew meanings and quite thoroughly, and so they are a good foundation, really.
Okay, great.
So yeah.
That's good.
Okay. All right. Oops, it's
No.
2 o'clock nearly. So what I'll do is I will save the broadcast, and I'll make it private, and I'll give you the link to it.
Okay.
And then if you do want to use it with anyone else, that you're totally free to do that. If you want to just keep it for yourself so that you can go back over it or refer to it, that's fine. And we'll see what happens. It will, when I end the broadcast, it will appear in a while as a YouTube file on my YouTube channel, and I'll just go in and make it private, and then send you the link.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Okay. So you're up okay for this time next week, or?
Yeah. So the 17th. Yeah. That's fine with me.
Yeah, I can do it next week.
Okay. All right. That will be good. So yeah, no, that's good. So I'll